What's up, everybody? Thegoal60 here for week 4 of the 2018 college football season. Now, this first game I want to talk about is a Friday night game, and that is between USC and Washington State. Now, currently, USC is a 3.5 point favorite at home with a total of 53. Right now, I have the projected stats at Washington State rushing for around 125 yards, passing for around 275. I've got USC rushing around 120, which would be a major bounce back from what they did last week against Texas, where they actually had negative yards, and passing around 235. I gave a 2.5 point home field edge to USC in this game, but even with that, when I came out and projected everything, I have Washington State actually being the favorite by 1 point. So my play here is Washington State plus 3.5. Now, some of the recent trends, USC is 0-5 their last 5 Friday night games. They're 1-6 their last 7 home games. And Washington State is 14-6 their last 20 as a road dog. So everything to me points towards Washington State, and therefore that will be the first play, Washington State plus 3.5. Now, this next game I'm going to talk about is a traditional rival in the SEC East. We've got 2 brand new coaches in this series, and that is Florida and Tennessee. Now, this game is in Knoxville. Currently, Florida is a 4.5 point favorite with an over-under of 46.5. I have projections of Florida rushing for around 130 yards and passing for around 230. I also have Tennessee rushing for around 170 yards and passing for closer to 165. My line that I set here is 53.5. So therefore, I'm looking at the over. I think that last week, Florida rebounded from that loss against Kentucky and hung in the upper 40s on Colorado State. I look at Tennessee, who put up 24 last week. It was against, UTEP, so nothing big there. But I just feel like this kind of game, to me, looks like it's going to go over. So I'm taking the over 46.5 as my second play. Now for game 3, I actually have 2 more SEC East teams. These are 2 teams that I picked to finish in the top 3 before the year started, and I think they're very good teams. Now, one team I think has a lot more talent than the other, and this game is Georgia at Missouri. I think Georgia has a lot more talent than what Missouri does, especially on defense and on the line of scrimmage. But at the same time, Missouri can put up a lot of points. Now, currently, Georgia is a 15-point favorite with an over-under of 64.5. I have projections of Georgia putting up 200 yards rushing and close to 300 yards passing. I have Missouri putting up 150 yards rushing and 280 yards passing. So as you can tell, a lot of offense here. I think that Georgia can score at will. I think they want to make a statement here. It's a big chance to, get a big win here. Last year, this game was very close until halftime. Then Georgia came out and ran away. I think that they're going to be a lot more focused this week. And then again, on the other side of the ball, on the other side of the field, you've got Drew Lock and what he can do. So look at some recent trends here. Missouri to the over is 4-0. Their last 4 is a dog of 10.5 or more. The over is 13-6 in the last 19 of Missouri's games after allowing 300 plus passing. Last week they gave up over 570 yards to Purdue. And also, Georgia to the over is 5-2 their last 7 road games. To me, everything points here to going over. In fact, my number actually set at 72. Right now it's at 64.5, so I'm going with the over 64.5 in the Georgia-Missouri game. Now let's talk about a game going on out west in the Pac-12. So this is the game day game. Everything's going to be hyped up. The home team is going to be very pumped up. And that is Stanford and Oregon. So right now, Stanford is a 2.5 point favorite with an over-under of 56. I have projections of Stanford putting up around 145 yards rushing with 200 yards passing. I also have 145 yards rushing for Oregon with 230 yards passing. I'm a big fan of Justin Herbert for Oregon. I think as long as he's healthy, this team can do a lot of really good things. Now, on the flip side, they did give up a lot of yards last week to San Jose State. But I really think that was an overlooked game. That was one of those situations where they knew what was coming up. This team is fairly young as far as the fact that they've not been in this kind of situation. You have to remember it's been 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4 or 5, since Oregon was really putting up those big numbers and playing in very high-profile games. They're back to that level, in my opinion, in a way, like game day going there. Obviously, they're not on the level of where Chip Kelly had them, going to national championship games, but they're still on the up and up. My line, I have Oregon -4 here. I think the wrong team is favored, and I give Oregon a home field advantage of 2 points. Therefore, I think Oregon +2.5 is the play here. Now, this next game, Game 5, we're actually going to stay in the Pac-12, but we're going to go to Oregon State, who takes on Arizona this week. Now, Arizona on the road is a 6-point favorite. The over-under this week is 75.5, so a lot of points expected here, which is that traditional Pac-12 way of doing things. I have projections of Arizona rushing for around 210 yards, passing for around 285, with Oregon State rushing around 195 and passing around 200. So right around even. Oregon State can move the ball a little bit, but they haven't really had that much competition outside of Ohio State on Game 1, where they absolutely got obliterated until late in the second half. Now, trend, Oregon State to the under is 7-2-1 their last 10 as a home dog of 3.5 to 10 points. So this line fits right in the middle of that. I have this line set at 67.5, and therefore I'm looking at taking the under 75.5. So in the Arizona-Oregon State game, I'm going under 75.5. Now let's move over to the Midwest, and let's talk about a Big Ten game, Wisconsin and Iowa. So last week, Wisconsin was embarrassed at home. They only lost by 3, but they lost to BYU. Wisconsin was expecting to have a huge year, just like they have the last few years. And unfortunately, they come out and just really couldn't get anything going. Now, Jonathan Taylor, their running back, he was pretty solid as far as the day went on. But the rest of the offense couldn't really do anything. Defense didn't give up a ton of points. 24 is not anything out of the ordinary. Of course, they would have, at home, you would have thought they'd have held it closer to, say, 10 or 14. But either way, they did come out with an L. Now, I have projections of Wisconsin rushing for 180 yards, passing for 200. I have Iowa rushing for 125 yards and passing around 140. So I see, not that much offense going on, but enough. Right now, the line is Wisconsin -3 and a total of 43.5. I feel like Wisconsin's going to come out and try to really get their offense going, get some momentum, get some confidence behind them instead of putting up 21 against BYU. I look for them to go on this road this week with a head of steam and trying to get something going. And therefore, I set the number here at 50.5, which is enough to be over the total that is posted right now, 43.5. So in the Wisconsin-Iowa game, I'm going over 43.5. Now next up we have Game 7, and that is in the Big 12, Kansas and Baylor. So both of these teams, obviously Kansas has had their troubles for the past few years. Baylor has been down for a while. They seem to be getting a little bit better. I thought before the season started that Baylor may come into this game, or come into the season, maybe get to 6-6, and it will be a really good year 2 for Matt Rule. I still think they can do that. Right now, Baylor is a 9.5-point favorite at home with a total of 58.5. I have projections of 225 yards on the ground for Kansas with 160 yards passing, 140 on the ground for Baylor with 210 yards passing. Last week, Kansas put up 400 yards of rushing offense against Rutgers. And I know that's Rutgers, it's no big deal, but it did give them a little bit of momentum. And if you can, it's just like the way football has been played for 100 years. If you can run the ball successfully and control tempo, you've got a shot. Now, I give Baylor 1.5 of home field advantage here, but I set the number at Baylor -1.5, which is a good 8 points away from the total. So therefore, I'm going to ride the hot hand. I'm going with Kansas plus 9.5 on the road. Like I said, you've got to ride the hot hand. They may turn out this week and lose by 50. I don't know, but I feel like they've got a little bit of momentum. They may not win this game outright, but I think they can stay within that 9.5. Now for Game 8, we stay in the Big 12, and we head to West Virginia. So Kansas State goes on the road to West Virginia, and right now West Virginia is a 16-point favorite at home with a total of 60.5. Now this game over the last few years is generally pretty close. You know, you've had a few scores at the end of the game here and there, but generally this game is played pretty tough, so it's always a really good game to watch. This seems like a big line to me. You know, I give West Virginia a couple points of home field advantage here. My projections, I have Kansas State rushing for around 125 yards, passing for around 150. I have West Virginia rushing around 150 and passing around 285. Will Greer is the difference in this game, in my opinion. Some trends, West Virginia to the under is 6-1 their last 7 after a bye. Now last week wasn't technically their bye week, but because of the storm they had to take it off, so I counted it as a bye. Kansas State to the under is 4-0 their last 4 after a straight up win. Last week they took care of business at home against UTSA, so that fit there. I set the number at 54, which is good enough for a 6.5 point difference. I'm taking the under 60.5 in this game for Kansas State and West Virginia. Now for game 9, I'm going to the ACC, so Louisville at Virginia. Currently, Virginia is at -5 with a total of 54.5. When I did my projections and I looked at all the numbers, I thought, man, I've really screwed something up. And I may have, but I'm on the same direction as what the Vegas odds makers are. I have Louisville rushing for around 125 yards, passing for around 145. I have Virginia rushing for around 190 yards and passing around 145. So, as you can tell, I've got Virginia in the stats leading slightly. I've got them trying to control the clock. You know, it looks like they're going to play a lot of defense at home, trying to get a win here. And if you look at the recent trends, Virginia to the under is 18-4 their last 22 after scoring 40 points. Last week they scored more than 40 at, playing against a smaller team, but they still scored more than 40. I set the number here around 49.5, and therefore I'm going under 54.5. And finally, it's game 10, which is back in the ACC. I guess you could say ACC and an independent, and that is Notre Dame on the road against Wake Forest. Now, Wake Forest has had more than a week to prepare for this game as they played last Thursday night against Boston College. Notre Dame comes to this game as a 7.5 point favorite with a total of 61. Now, projected stats, I have Notre Dame rushing for around 190 yards, passing for around 170. I have Wake Forest rushing for around 145 yards. And if their freshman quarterback can do what he did last week, I have them around 220 yards passing. Now, looking at trends, Wake Forest to the under is 11-5 their last 16 after giving up more than 40 points. They gave up 41 last week to Boston College. And Notre Dame to the under is 4-0 their last 4 road games. And also they're 5-0 to the under their last 5 after against the spread loss. Last week at home, they were a big favorite, a couple touchdowns against Vanderbilt. Vandy comes in there and loses that game by 5. I set this number at 55, and therefore I'm taking the under 61 in the Notre Dame-Wake Forest game. Degenerate money line play this week, we're going with, along the same lines as the last game I just talked about, we're taking Wake Forest at home plus 245. Recapping everything, I had Washington State plus 3.5, Florida, Tennessee over 46.5, Georgia, Missouri over 64.5, Oregon plus 2.5, Arizona, Oregon State under 75.5, Wisconsin, Iowa over 43.5, Kansas plus 9.5, Kansas State, West Virginia under 60.5, Louisville and Virginia under 54.5, and Notre Dame, Wake Forest under 61.5. Whether you follow, fade, or pass, good luck this weekend. Hope you got some decent information out of this video. And we'll see you Sunday for the live stream at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to recap everything that happened on Saturday. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you Sunday.
60% of the time, it works every time.